first things coming to mind is preparation. No matter what the level is, whether it's a NBA player or a 10-year-old, if you're winging it and you're making shit up, they're gonna smell that on you. So prepare.
Hi, I'm Corey Baldwin.
And I'm Dan Searle, and we are back on Off the Beaten Path. This one is going to wind us around the world. This is a show for coaches living in obscurity, working in obscurity, even those who've made it out of obscurity into a far-off time zone.
Hey, it's a place for storytelling. Even some of those stories are true, believe it or not. Learning, connecting, reconnecting, in this case for Searle and Nick. Food for thought, and my favorite part, food for the belly. We got Nick Gibson today, a world traveler, and all through the game of hoops, man. Coaching it, teaching it, doing performance training, skill training, development, helping kids from all ages, all the way up to the pros. Tell us some more, Searle, before we actually hear the words of wisdom from Nick.
From the man himself, yes, world traveler is a great description there. Nick, let's jump right to it. Where are you? What's the time zone? And what are you doing?
I am hanging out. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm hanging out here in, I'm going to butcher this, but Gliwice, Poland. And we are trying, I'm with the Tunisian national team right now. Been with them for about a month, and we're trying to get them ready for a big summer, trying to qualify for the Olympics first. And then after that, trying to defend our crown in Africa. Got Afro basket later on this summer. So we're just playing some friendlies right now and getting the guys ready and, you know, seeing what we need to work on these next 10 weeks.
How did you get there? Well, that's what this podcast is all about. This is an Atlanta native who is in Poland as a performance trainer with the Tunisian national basketball team, trying to qualify for the Olympics. You heard that right. And later this summer, defend their Afro basket title. So Nick, take us back to Atlanta. Where'd you go to high school? Where'd you play hoops? Why do you love this game? Because I know you do.
Yeah, well, I'm, you know, Atlanta, born and raised, got, you know, ATL tatted on my rib cage. So that's always going to be home. Went to Atlanta Public Schools through and through, Maryland Elementary, Inman Middle School, Grady High School.
Great.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Grady baby. And so loved it there. Always was in love with hoops. My dad encouraged me to play, you know, all sports growing up, but more and more I just fell in love with the game. Played at Grady. You know, I went to Syracuse. They were not anxious to sign me to a letter of intent there. So I had some lower level looks, I'll say. But you know, I wanted to do journalism, and I figured if I couldn't play the game that I loved at the highest levels, that it would be cool to cover it at the highest levels. So that's kind of why I went to Syracuse initially, and then as I'm sure we'll get into, things sort of went off the beaten path from there.
They sure did. And back to Grady, what do you think of the name change? Midtown High School or Grady?
It's a tricky one. I've had conversations with a lot of friends of you know, multiple races, because I think, you know, I thought some of the names that were proposed, like Ida B. Wells, that was the one I thought would have been cool. Mm-hmm. Midtown High, I think my black friends and my white friends who went to Grady, we all agree it's a little bit lame and sort of just lacking personality. I totally understand the intent, right? That, you know, Henry W. Grady had a segregationist past and history. I thought since Grady is a school known for its communications and journalism program, mm-hmm. that it would have been cool to pay homage to someone like Ida B. Wells, who was a black woman and pioneer in that field as well. So that would have been my choice, but they didn't ask me. At the end of the day, I think the kids who are going to the school are the ones who should decide, because they're the ones who have to walk into that school every day and wear it across their chest. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Hey, that's a deeper answer than we expect kind of off the bat there, but I appreciate that perspective, Nick, a lot, and that's what you bring. And also got to commend you for choosing Syracuse, the second best journalism school out there. A good choice for you there, and set you on the right path.
I don't know where you're getting your rankings, but
yeah.
Hey, I guess if they were the best journalism school, I'd be a journalist right now, huh? So maybe you're on something.
Their basketball team's better than the other journalism school, though, that's for sure. All right. So a few minutes of your time at Syracuse. What'd you do on the hoop side? How did you plug in either with the team, with ACC, which was then Big East stuff, with coaches, with newspapers, on campus, so many different publications or broadcast opportunities? What'd you do?
For sure. And so many great opportunities. And I did zero of those things, Coach. At zero of them. I went, you know me, I do kind of like to do my own thing a little bit. I went to a couple of meetings for the paper, went to a couple of meetings for Citrus TV, the TV station.
That's really what it's called, huh? Citrus TV, the big orange?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then there was an NPR station there that did some really good stuff. I went to a couple of those meetings. And as is with the theme, I sort of was like, oh, well, let's maybe figure something else out. So long story short on that one, my roommate at the time, or one of my best friends, my freshman year, we became roommates the next 3 years, huge basketball nut. One day we were shooting around and he was like, there's this I saw this fantasy league for European basketball, and I was like, oh shit, that's where like Trajan Langdon's playing. And speaking about ACC, I was a Duke guy growing up, and so I knew Langdon was over there. I knew Ed Cota. We started seeing all these names, Bracy Wright, all these dudes that we had known from college, the kind of the where are they now guys. And so we literally just joined this Euroleague fantasy league because we love basketball, and we were like, oh, let's try this out. And about 2 weeks later, we were like, let's start a podcast, because I was there to do journalism. I wanted to do something. So I don't know if you guys know any two guys who maybe just started a podcast one day, but
took us a little longer.
It has its draw, right? So we sat down and recorded it on my Mac, talking about teams that we could barely pronounce. We do a little bit better now, but not so much maybe. And just started talking shit about Euroleague basketball, and we put it out there, and kind of into the void, not knowing if anyone would ever listen to it. And we saw 2 or 3 listens, like, okay, that's mom, dad, guess only one of your parents loves you. So, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, 17, and then 23, then 38, which is obviously nothing, but to us it was like, okay, well, we got someone listening from somewhere. And we looked at the Google Analytics, and we'd have one person from Bosnia, and we get really fired up, and one person from Turkey, and one person from Serbia, and 2 people from Lithuania. And so we really went with it, and for better or for worse, really dove into it, turned it into a full-blown website, started writing articles, and then I'll tighten up the rest here, keep on the 24-second shot clock. But I started writing. I actually emailed 20 publications, like, hey, does anyone have any interest in European basketball? And I got one response, and it was from Slam magazine, which was my favorite magazine growing up. Always put their posters on my wall. Got a letter to the editor published when I was 16, in the Carmelo Anthony cover, and I was super fired up. So Slam was like, yeah, sure, we'll give you a platform, and we'll give you a blog. So I started doing a weekly blog on Slam magazine. On the online thing, of course, they weren't putting your boy in print. And
hey, I'm with you. You get, but you're connected to the magazine you read every month, and you couldn't wait for the next issue. And here you are, right, with a byline.
Yeah, so I was really psyched about that, honestly. And so basically, to kind of fast forward a little bit, we were lucky enough to start getting credentialed to go to events. We went to a couple of the Euroleague teams came and played in America. We would take off school and go to Phoenix and Denver to watch the Nuggets play Partizan from Belgrade, and to watch the Josh Childress led, and Pat Beverly was actually my first feature, playing for Olympiacos at the time. And they're playing the Cavs in a preseason game. So we'd hop in the car and drive 8 hours to Cleveland or whatever. And then kind of the big break came. We got credentialed to go to the cover the World Cup in Istanbul my senior year. So I emailed my teachers like a day before class started. I said, hey, I got this opportunity. I'm missing the first 2 weeks of school. I'll see you guys when I get back. And they didn't love that, but I was like, hey, you know, that's y'all's problem. I'm going to do this. And so I went to Istanbul and got an amazing opportunity there to go on the BBC radio for like a couple of times, talk about the USA team, and then they sort of realized
as a US expert, exactly.
Right, and then they realized that I was like, hey, this USA guy actually just wants to talk about the fucking Serbians, though. So I was like, yeah, Kevin Durant, he's pretty good, but have you guys seen Milos Teodosic play pick and roll? And so they invited me on to do all the games. So I sat courtside and got to call the games for BBC World Service. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was a lot of fun. With Chris Mitchell, who's a great dude and great commentator. So I was doing like the color commentary there. It's a dream come true.
Wow. Where do we find these? Are these games up on YouTube? Where can we push our viewer listeners to hear Nick Gibson's color commentary with his British accent?
It's a great question. To my knowledge, the only audio files of that exist on like my dad's hard drive somewhere because he recorded it. But I don't. That's a good question. I'm sure I would cringe if I went back and listened to it now, but it might be fun. It might be fun to dig it up. So yeah, and I met Chris Sheridan, who was working with ESPN at the time. He branched off ESPN after that and started his own website, and I started writing for him and just sort of took any opportunity that came along. And then after college, Sam and I, were running Euroleague Adventures, which was our site and podcast, we were like, hey, we could, you know, go back home and be broke there, or we could move to Spain and move to Barcelona and be broke there. So we took door 2, and happy we did.
So, hey, a lot to digest right there, but a couple of things that I don't want to skip over all of it, but a couple of things. One, obviously, you're a basketball junkie. I think that will go without saying. And the fact that you just went on a whim with a lot of these things is unbelievable and shows your talent as well as a writer and a broadcaster. And now, how in the world did you turn this into coaching? You know, me listening to it for the first time. Searle knows the story. I don't. I'm in amazement right now where this thing's going to go. So keep us going, man. Keep us going. I'm loving it.
All right, so I'm actually gonna hold me to 24 seconds on this one, and I'm gonna fast forward to the next decade, and then we can pick apart anywhere y'all want to go from there. So
well, hold on. Well, tell us. So tell us when you went to Spain. What happened? It's okay. We got time. Tell us what happened in Spain.
He had a good time. You know, I know coaches don't like over dribbling, and that's kind of the verbal equivalent of what I'm about to do. But Spain was incredible. I mean, I can't lie to you. It's like it was a great time. We weren't just over there like, you know, grinding every single day. We were like, all right, well, Barcelona has an ACB game, Spanish League game on a Sunday, and Badalona has one on Sunday, and you know, we got one EuroLeague game on Wednesday. So that's kind of the only thing on our schedule, really. I'd write one article a week for Sheridan Hoops, keep the tapas on the table, and, you know, a lukewarm beer in our glass, and
you got to go for this. You got to get the small cognac because it'll be done before it gets warm, man.
That's a man who knows right there. Yeah, you don't fuck around and get the big ones, and then by the end it's just like, no, you got to get the shorties, the 6-8 ounce pours.
There you go.
The San Miguel or Estrella Damm. And so yeah, we had a good time. We you know, credit to Sam, I'm not much of a planner, so we literally showed up. Only thing we had booked was a hostel for 2 days, and we're like, all right, well, we'll get there and we'll find somewhere to live. And I did not look at all. Sam got on Craigslist and found a couple of spots, and we went and looked at one spot. They were like, there's only one bedroom. There's like a couch that kind of pulls out, but we looked out of the balcony and we could see the ocean. So we were like, nah, we're taking this. This is the one. so we booked it, and every 2 weeks we'd switch from the bed. One person gets the couch, and unless someone came home with a friend. And so that was a really good 3 months there. And then we moved to the Gothic district after that for another 3 months. What happened though is we decided to overstay our visa. So after we were in Barcelona for an extra 3 months on our way out, in the Basel Mulhouse Freiburg airport, which is German, Swiss, and French, they were like, there's no one there. It's 4 a.m. We're going to Istanbul because we're moving there for a month and a half to get ready for the Final Four, Euroleague Final Four.
Yeah.
And the guy's looking at us, looking at our passport. He gets on the phone. We're like, oh, shit. So long story short there, we get banned from Europe for 2 years, which kind of foiled our plans of living in Europe. So we're in Istanbul.
Kind of hurts the Euro cast.
Yep, sort of did. We're like, oh, we're gonna have to rebrand pretty heavily here. So in Istanbul, we got credentialed to go be in the EuroLeague to cover the EuroLeague Final Four, which was a dream come true, and that was in Istanbul. And so we looked at the prices. Like, we could get in like a hotel for 3 days, or we could find for the same price like a really cheap apartment on the Asian side of Istanbul for a month. And so we did that. And so we got there, saying we didn't have a place to live, but we had, some couple of Turkish friends that were like covering hoops. They're like, hey, we'll show you guys around. So we would go and look at 4 or 5 apartments. We get our pick, and we live in Üsküdar, right on the Asian side of the Bosphorus Strait in Istanbul.
Yeah, just describe that. When you say the Asian side, for those of us not that familiar with geography, what does that mean? And what is Istanbul?
That means they don't serve beer at the restaurants that are on the strait, whereas like the the European side is quite open and more open-minded, and you can find a party there, and it's a little bit more lively. That's where a lot of the the Blue Mosque and a lot of the more touristy attractions are. But then a nice little 15-minute ferry ride, a delightful ferry ride right across, is the Asian side. So that's where Fenerbahce Ulker plays, the real power there. So it's culturally rich, but just a little bit more conservative. But you can always take a 15-minute ferry ride over if you want to go down Istiklal and have a little fun, which we were definitely doing at the time. But
how about that? And that Fenerbahce name comes up quite a bit right now as the Atlanta Hawks are playing. What's the connection there?
With Fenerbahce in Atlanta?
And Bogdanovic, did he spend some time over there?
Man, absolutely. So that's Bogdanovic that's very cool to see him in a Hawks uniform. One of my favorite all-time players over there. When he was first coming up, he was playing with Partizan in Belgrade, which is kind of like the one team I sort of root for in Europe. And then, he made the jump to play for Željko Obradović, who's, the Popovich of Europe with Fenerbahce, and really turned from a really high-level prospect into a superstar. And when he was there, he was just, it was always, not always, but it was pretty clear to me that if someone ever gave him a chance to give him the ball and let him be himself, that they were going to reap the benefits, instead of just like a lot of these European guys come in and they want to make him just into like a role player, a spot shooter, just because they've got a European name. And Bogdanovic is not that guy. He's not Bojan Bogdanovic, for instance. He's Bogdan. He's a motherfucker. I mean, he's tough. I don't know a better way to put it. Sorry. He's tough. He wants to take the big shot. He wants the big moment. He's mentally strong. When I was with the Hawks scouting, he was always one of my favorite guys that I would really try to push, and really always enjoyed watching. So yeah, it's really cool now to see him kind of unleashed after time with the Kings, where he was, he had some moments, but he was always sort of like that third or fourth creator. And he's just such a perfect fit next to Trae Young, because he's someone else that can create and handle pressure, and he's shooting the ball better than he ever has in his career this year. So he's really kind of got the full package.
this is what we do. We go off the beaten path. We stay somewhat chronological, but we go on tangents. And we're on the Bogdanovich tangent. And we talked to Bob Rathbun a couple days ago on the WCAT
cool.
Chats podcast. And Bob Rathbun said, I've got a man crush on Bogdanovich, and explained why, but he loves watching him play. And we can hear your passion and connection there too. But back we are to the Asian side of Istanbul.
Yeah. So that was a blast. I mean, we covered that Final Four. There actually might be a video of this if the Euroleague hasn't taken it down again, but I sort of went and put it back up. So that Final Four was one of the most famous shots in European basketball history. Georgios Printezis hit the floater from the left side of the floor to beat CSKA Moscow in literally at the buzzer. You know, there aren't too many buzzer beating championship winning shots, and to do that at the very highest level was insane to be there in person. And my buddy Sam and I, I got to brag here. Euroleague Adventures was the only publication to have 3 credentials for that Final Four. Us two, and then one of our writers, Rob Scott, who's maybe the best, probably for my money, the best European basketball writer there is. And we got live video of it and our live reaction. And whereas Euroleague Adventures maybe had, you know, a few thousand listeners here and there, maybe like some months with double-digit thousand hits, overnight that video got up to 200,000 views and almost up to 1 million by the end of the week. And the Euroleague was like, take this down, it's copyright violation. I was like, sorry, we're trying, but really we just wanted to see that thing hit 1 million.
Right, viral, let's go.
Yeah, I was like, Euroleague, sorry for promoting your product, that's our fault. So yeah, that was really cool, just to kind of cap off a year of being abroad, 7 months of being abroad, and we had just been banned from the continent we love. So to at least get that final moment before we went back home to the States with no money and no plan was a really cool way to finish it off.
How about that? All right. And so you do end up back in the States, and that's what Corey was asking about now. Do you find a path into coaching, into training?
I wasn't quite done just traveling mindlessly and aimlessly. So I wanted to keep my Spanish going, and it had gotten okay. And so I was obviously banned from Spain again. So I was like, oh, let's try out South America. So I moved to Buenos Aires for 7 months.
Claro que sí.
Claro que sí. And it was, me encantó. I loved it very much. And the food was amazing. You know, I mean, for a broke 23-year-old, if you can get like a $7 wine and steak, it's not too bad. So moved down there for 6 months. I kept writing, doing the slam stuff, writing an article here or there for freelance. Honestly, like most of the stuff I did, more than half the stuff I've done in my life has been not for money, but more for just let's do this because I want to do this and I'm passionate about it, and we'll see if the money comes eventually. And so I taught, like, I would teach 4 English lessons a week, tutor, like personal tutors, meet, you know, someone in a coffee shop and, you know, talk about verbs and whatever. And that was cool because I got some interaction with some local folks, and it kept a little bit of money in my pocket for beer and wine and steak and whatever else. And
Argentina.
Yes, sir. And so I'll give you a little playoff connection too. I fell in love with a player there by the name of Facundo Campazzo.
I knew you were going to say that. I was going to ask.
I fell in love with him. And him and Nicolas Laprovitola, who had a brief moment on the Spurs and then now plays with Real Madrid. But I was like, yo, these dudes are good. And so for me, it was just an opportunity. I was like, hey, I know nothing about Argentine basketball, South American basketball, really. So it was a chance for me to kind of just dive into a new league, figure it out, meet with some coaches, you know, have some coffees or drinks with a coach here or there, a scout here or there who's passing through, and see what would happen. And then also another way that I made a little side cash there, which is actually one of the more fun things I've done, is y'all know the NBA 2K, like the video game. So there was 2 years where they included European players, and Sam and I actually created all those European players for 2 years.
No way.
Yeah.
On
so
2K?
Yeah, for 2K. So it was like 198 cell, I remember the exact number, 198 cells, Excel spreadsheet for each player, how they drive left, how they drive right, what, you know, everything. And we ended up making some of the players probably a little bit better than they were in real life. So like Real Madrid was like a 96 or something. But it was a blast for us because I would just wake up, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna watch, you know, I'm gonna watch Sergio Yul and Sergio Rodriguez and Rudy Fernandez today, and tomorrow I'll watch Felipe Reyes and Nikola Mirotic, you know. So it was cool. It was a way to kind of like scout, which I wanted to do. I really wanted to get into that more than anything. I wanted to get away a little bit from writing because I was realizing this is fun, but I really want to be a part of this. I really want to build teams. I really want to be on the other side and not just the person, you know, asking the question here. Which is the cool thing about journalism is that you get access to be able to realize those things. So I always tell young journalists that, like, hey, just because you got a journalism major, that's cool, but that's going to give you access to your passion. And if your passion takes you somewhere else, you know, listen to that. So I really realized I wanted to go to these games, and I'd sit with scouts and I would go back and write an article with a deadline, and they'd go back and think about the bigger picture. And I was like, I kind of like what you're doing a little bit more. So when I ran out of money in Argentina, which is a theme when I leave places, I was like, oh, okay, well, I need enough to get home. And then after that, we'll figure it out. I went back to Atlanta, and as I always do, hop behind the bar to make some money. I bartended on and off for 6 years. That's, you know, Slam magazine articles here and there. We're not paying the bills to do all this. So I'd have to go home and make some money. And so I did that. And while I was doing that, I was trying to make every connection I possibly could. And I kind of cold emailed Danny Ferry. And after like a month or so, he got back to me and said, hey, I'm back in a month or two, and let's have lunch. I was like, shit, say less, I'll be there. So
and this is Danny Ferry, a GM for the Hawks at the time, the front office. Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. And so I showed up there not knowing what to expect, but just kind of wanted to sit down with him and tell my story and see if I could help in some way. I was, you know, a huge Hawks fan growing up, so just to take that meeting was like very unlikely. I was like, are you sure he wants to meet with me? But so I show up there and we have a great talk for about an hour or so, telling my story. He introduces me to, you know, everyone on the coaching staff. I got to talk to Quinn Snyder for a while. He had just gotten back from CSKA Moscow, so we had a really cool talk. And then he basically put me on like a bit of a tryout. For the next 2 months, I would kind of just wake up and they would say, okay, Bojan Bogdanovic, Dario Saric, go. Okay, so I'd write something up that he literally nothing else beyond that, just like a prompt of a couple of players, and let's see what you got. And then, you know, Wes Wilcox, assistant general manager, would call me and say, okay, I need to know the 50 players that we need to know in Europe. Go. Okay. And so kind of without direction, they would just throw these little prompts out, and I would hop to it and send them what I thought was good. I've looked back at some of the stuff I wrote back then, and I was like, oh my God, how did I ever get my foot in the door, you know? But like
No, Nick, be honest about that. Were you on the mark on some of it, lots of it, or were you not even close?
I'll give you one specific here. That is something that I remember, and I talked to, like, you know, when I'm anyone who ever is like, hey, will you read my scouting report? I'm like, of course. So like Bogdanovic, I was really high. I remember my first sentence, excellent shooter. My first sentence, and Wes called me up and said, is he an excellent shooter? And he goes, yeah. He goes, what makes him excellent? I was like, oh shit, sounds like a trick question. And I was like, well, I think I said something like, I mean, when he has an open shot, you expect it to go in. He can shoot from multiple levels, and, you know, he's very proficient shooter. I tried to probably use some like word like proficient to sound smarter or whatever. But and his point was, well, I'm looking at it and he's shooting 36%. We have Kyle Korver, he's shooting 42%. So are they both excellent? And I was like, oh, you know, you have a point. So that kind of taught me the importance of, which I learned later, which spoiler alert, the Hawks did decide to hire me. And I learned that having an organizational language is important. So for us, we literally had capital E, excellent, was like 42 or above, and great was 40 to 42, and really good was 38 to 40. And so, by that standard, Bojan Bogdanovic was a capital R, capital G, really good shooter. Now, if I wanted to say, I think he has the capacity to become an excellent shooter, which, I mean, he did, but at the time he was not. So saying he is an excellent shooter was in fact not the case. So that's something that was valuable for me to learn. And just, if you're having conversations with people about a player, a lot of time you're going to waste time going in circles because you're maybe saying the same thing but in a different way. So defining your organizational language and how you speak about players and what you value as an organization is the first thing you need to figure out before you start talking about who you want to bring into your program. So that was just one of the first great lessons I remember learning.
That's great advice. Corey, just because you're a program builder and developer, do you have organizational language around shooters? What excellent, or do you look at numbers? What do you do? As you're both recruiting or getting people minutes during your run to Hutch?
I think a lot of times percentages are huge, and I think I would have probably done the same thing. Maybe not in exact terms, but if someone was telling me someone's an excellent shooter and they're not in the 40s, I would immediately be like, whoa, hold on now. You know what I mean? And sometimes an excellent shooter in recruiting can be shot selection as well. So sometimes percentages can lie a little bit if they're taking bad shots. But in straight up scouting, yeah, that would be that's good stuff. I mean, and people do different things. They word guys, what kind of level they are. So I've heard other coaches, put, is he a Curry shooter, make it off dribble from anywhere, deep, Lillard type shooter, or is he a Rondo shooter? He's made himself a shooter, so he has to be kind of set, or is he a Rondo in a Celtic uniform shooter, which means he's not a shooter at all. Different people word it different ways, but those are some of the ones I've seen. I like stuff like that because kids relate to it a little better because they know who those guys are and they know what they do. Is he a Klay, off the catch, not going to do a lot of bouncing to get to a shot, different things like that. But yeah, that's stuff that we use some. But I like that. That's good stuff talking about excellent 40 to 42. Is that what you said, or 40 plus? Is that what you said?
I believe it was 42 or above. I mean, these are things where it could have been one or two off, but I think 40 to 42 was like great, and then 42 or above, or 43 and above was excellent. So it was, but like whatever it is, like you said, just understanding what that means. So if it's Rondo, Curry, Klay, as long as everyone in the conversation knows what that means, then you're speaking the same language. And I find that folks waste so much time because they have a lack of definition of what they're even looking for. And I mean, and one, like the biggest thing, especially now that I've kind of drifted into this performance space, is the word athlete. Drives me fucking nuts. What are you saying? What does that mean? Like what movements does that encapsulate? What's the goal of the position? I mean, does a lot of times people just mean he jumps high or he looks strong. That's what I think a lot of folks end up thinking when they say, oh, he's a great athlete. It's like, well,
not a measurable term.
Right. Or if we are going to measure it, let's figure out which measurables we value. Right. Correct. And so that's one of them that we started talking about in Atlanta. And now that I'm, like I said, more in that performance space and working at this at P3 Sports Science, that's one of the reasons I wanted to work there, is because they're actively trying to define. They've tested 600 NBA players on force plates, and they have all of this data that can help say joint angles, force production, and figure out what matters and maybe what doesn't. And if we figure out what matters, how much can we change that? How much are, for coaches, this is, I think, the end goal for me. I don't know, end goal is not the right word because you're never at the end. But one of the big questions I want to answer is, okay, if we find out how many different kinds of athletes there are per se, right? I'll give a very specific example. Pick and roll coverage. You can't ask everyone on the team to hedge and recover, right? Some guys cannot physically do that. So if as a coach, you got player X and you're asking him to hedge and recover and he fails 8 out of 10 times, at a certain point, that's on you as a coach, right? To say, well, this scheme and this player is not a good fit. So maybe when we're playing player X, we go into a drop or we go into flat help, whatever it may be, or we do a quick show, a light show. So I think another example that I was talking about with the coach this week, today actually, is the concept of verticality. You look at guys and you say, go vertical, be vertical. Ask your team to stand there and sit back in a stance and then put their arms directly over their head. I'm guessing half the team can't get it past their ears. So, okay, they lack shoulder mobility. Maybe they lack hip mobility. So instead of, a lot of times these players go to the ref, I was vertical. I don't think they're lying. I think a lot of them think they're vertical, but they're not. And if you show them a tape of themselves, like, hey man, you were not vertical. But instead of saying, be vertical, be vertical, be vertical, I think it's crucial to be able to teach these players, hey, here's a shoulder mobility routine you can do 3 times a week in your bedroom while you're watching Netflix. That'll take 5 minutes. That will increase your shoulder mobility by, 1% every week until slowly kind of leaning forward, that foul becomes perfect defense. And then you can turn and get the rebound. And now we're running, now we're playing. So it's not just about exclusion, saying, oh, if you're not, you must be this athletic to ride, this athletic to play. It's saying, what qualities can we functionally improve that are going to translate directly to performance on the court?
Nick,
so I know I'm on a different tangent, but
this is a whole nother podcast, but it is deep and intense. And you just made me a better coach because I'm the guy saying, stay vertical, wall up. And these 7th graders are not able to do it. And now I will look at it in a different way. Thank you. And they thank you too.
I'm still figuring it out, but it's great to be back in a team setting after a couple of years of, intense learning at P3, which was, I was super grateful to have that opportunity during the pandemic to, when team basketball kind of slowed down anyways, to go somewhere where I could really just like dive into a lot of this stuff. So now being back in a team setting and being able to apply it all, we got some dudes with really bad shoulder mobility on the team right now. And it's really hard for them to wall up. It's really hard for them to chest block on defense because they're leaning forward, and it might be ankle mobility, might be hip mobility, might be shoulder mobility, thoracic mobility, could be all 4. But, if we don't give these kids or even adults the tools to be able to do it, then it's unreasonable to demand that from them physically,
That's a very good point. And hey, for viewers, listeners who are jumping in mid podcast, let's give you some quick context. Nick, tell us exactly where you are. You in a hotel room somewhere in Poland? Is that where your setup is right now for this podcast?
Hotel room in Poland, and yes, sir, we're with the Tunisian national team, playing some friendlies, playing Russia and Mexico the last 2 days, and next week a few days we'll go to Germany to play Italy, Czech Republic, and Germany. I was blanking on the host country. That's must be late here.
Hey, well, and, what time is it? You got coming up on midnight?
On the dot, yes, sir. So yeah, we're getting ready to try to qualify for the Olympics. Going to be some tough games, and then trying to win the African championships later on this summer. So being back with the team has been incredible. These guys in Tunisia they're just phenomenal to work with. To a man, every single one works incredibly hard, listens, values everything you tell them, which really makes you want to make sure you're telling them the right thing. It's been an incredible experience, incredible experience. I'm so grateful to the country and everyone in it and all these players. It's been phenomenal.
Wow. And we'll get to how you got there in a second. Corey, you're on the move down in Waycross, coming out of a gym and going to another one. Where you calling in from?
I'm at the Waycross Rec Center, 10U Waycross Sonics practice here. and just came from our summer workout over in the Douglas campus, and don't know where the next stop will be, but in the car right now trying to finish it up. It's only around 6 here, so we're about 6 hours difference, I guess. But it's cool. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, great stories here with Nick. I just got off the court with the Westminster summer workouts with our 7th graders through the 12th graders. So back to you, Nick. You gave us the spoiler. We'll jump back in. You got hired by the Hawks. Give us a quick little run through there, and then the next couple steps with some TSF and some P3, and some other coaching bits, and then how the Tunisia connection happened and some stories there.
For sure. So Atlanta was fantastic. I got to, learn from a super intelligent group of people. My first year, I was just like a, front office, just like kind of did a little bit of everything. I'm talking about, yes, I was scouting Bogdan Bogdanovic and Nikola Jokic, but then I was also getting there early to make sure the Gatorades were in the cooler and that they were lined up with the correct color, and that we had coffee for the meeting for trade deadlines and taking notes in those meetings. And then if they needed me on the court to go rebound for Al Horford or Jeff Teague, or, I would grab the shoes and run out there as well. So it was a super immersive experience where I got to see just a lot of it, which was what I wanted to do, was, go from covering it to being a part of it. So I got really thrown into the fire. It was, it kicked my ass. I'm not gonna lie. It kicked my ass. It was hard. It was early. It was long hours, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I learned a lot, learned a lot more from the shitty days, to be honest with you, than the smooth days. And my second year, I was given a little bit more responsibilities, kind of managed our scouting database, managed our draft board. But when I say manage, I don't mean like, move the names around willy-nilly, but if the scout sent me something, I was like, yep, I'll put that on the fucking Excel sheet for you, no problem. And so got to see how the whole process worked. And then the only scouting that I was actually doing was international scouting, as that was kind of what I had been developing some expertise on in the previous few years. And that means 90% of that was watching a ton of synergy video. And then if we found someone that was worth seeing, like a Bogdanovic, like a Saric, like a Cedi Osman, like a Jokic, then I would put together trips, for a lot of options for trips for our scouts to go see. Like, hey, there's this 1 week, 9-day trip. You can see Porzingis, you can see Saric, you can see Cedi Osman, you and kind of put together what it would look like, get on the phone with the travel agent, book the travel, get all of that. So, and then once I put together a good, few dozen of those, I got to go on a couple of my own. I got to go to Turkey and scout the U18s there. Saw Domantas Sabonis and Ante Zizic, Ivica Zubac, Dragan Bender, who I thought was going to be a star. You miss some, and so yeah, it was great. Nike Hoop Summit, stuff like that. It was great. Saw Jokic, saw Capella. So it was really great. And then
hey, just because we're based here in Atlanta and talking Atlanta, you mentioned Capella. People don't think of Capella as an international guy. What's the quick story there on the Swiss dude?
Right. So another good. I'm very open about talking about the ones that I missed here. So because I think like I said, I learned more from the shitty days and the smooth days. I learned more from the guys that I miss on than the guys that I hit on. There have been some of both, but any needed scout who tells you he hits on them all, he's walk out of the room, because that dude's not, he's lying to you. And Capella, for me, I really liked Capella. I thought he really fit the role that he's excelling in now. Then I go to Nike Hoop Summit and he shows up and he has no presence at all. 3 days of practice, I think it was, in a game. He just had no presence out there at all. He was sleepwalking through the practices. And so I just I don't want to say ripped him to shreds in my report, but it was like, hey man, if this guy's job is to be an energetic, active rim roller and rim protector, then he needs to have some energy. He needs to talk. And now looking back, okay, maybe he just got off a long flight. Maybe he's in America for the first time. Maybe he doesn't speak the language and isn't comfortable calling out picks yet. Maybe no one's taught him how to talk the right way. So these are things that I always look back and I'm like, why do I think I missed here? Also, I caution people against going to one workout or one practice or whatever and thinking that you know somebody, because you don't. We had a scout in our organization who went to see Paul George live twice. He scored 7 points and 5 points. And he was like, how the fuck am I supposed to draft this guy? How am I supposed to tell? Yeah, man, let's use our lottery pick. Like, so don't be overswayed by that availability bias, by whatever you have in front of you. But it's hard not to, because if you see something, it matters. And if you see it in person, it has a tendency to matter more. But that's why it's important. The most important part of scouting, more so than what you see. Yeah, the basketball is incredibly important, but we had a rule with the Hawks. We won't touch a guy in the first round unless we have 10 high level intel sources that we trust, because you have to find out who the human is, because the human is the amplifier of every raw talent. Most of the time when you're like, oh, why didn't that guy work out or that guy work out? He was so talented. Probably because something personally with him didn't click. Maybe he didn't love basketball. Maybe he didn't work hard. Maybe he didn't work hard because he didn't love basketball. So these are all things that you need to find out and really dig on, because like I said, I loved Capella. I saw him for 3 days and I was off him. I got in my own way on that one. So it's those are things that are always worth reminding myself of, I think.
Well, Corey, it's like recruiting at the college level too, a little bit. You want to get those touches and talk to the high school coach and talk to the AAU coach and talk to the middle school coach and the math teacher and all that, right?
Correct. You try to get as much info and intel and dirt and all that fun stuff. I do think a hard thing to measure, and I would think it would be even more hard at the pro level, is at what point is a person satisfied? And for some people, satisfied is, I got a college scholarship, I'm on a college team, and then you don't get the best of them because the best of them is already done. You want a person who's always thriving for more. So if you get a pro, you don't want a guy whose goal was to make pros. You want a guy whose goal was to be the best player at that level or whatever it may be. And that would be, a better example to see.
Coach, I got a question for you. So the one level I've never worked in is college before. And when you're talking to these coaches, right? Like, how do you determine who to trust and the quality of the intel versus all these guys that just want to pump up their own guys, A, or B, might think, hey, if this guy goes to the school, maybe I can grab a spot on the staff, et cetera, et cetera. Like, so how do you manage that? Because I've always thought that would be some really choppy waters to navigate.
I think it's very tough. I don't know. Sometimes people are people so you trust them, obviously. But anytime it's a new person, I think you have to take it with a grain of salt, no matter how much you want it to be true or how much you don't want it to be true. I think you got to shift through it. Hopefully it's people you know well enough. If it's not, I think you probably don't take it for Bible, as we like to say, for word or for truth, whatever term you want to use, because it's probably a little shaky.
For sure.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
But that's a tough one though, because so many people are always selling something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, same at that pro level where you've got the agents, you've got the difference in languages. It's probably quite a struggle when you do hit and get the right one. Hey Nick, let's try the 24-second shot clock, but it still won't go. We gotta go back to the beginning of the third quarter after the Hawks, because there was lots of movement there. Take us through the rest of your path.
Okay, so I'll go quick here. We had after my 2 years with the Hawks, I wanted to get into coaching because scouting was incredible, but it was like, all right, I'm writing all this stuff about these kids, or not kids, some kids, some men, and now it was so descriptive, and I wanted to do something a little bit more prescriptive. So it was like, hey, instead of saying, he's got no left hand, I wish he could read pick and roll better, it's like, oh, what if we could work on his left hand and try to help them read pick and roll better. So wanted to get into the coaching side, but I was not arrogant enough to think I could just start at a very high level there. So, you know, that's where I met you, Coach. I started working out at TSF, doing draft workouts and pro workouts for nothing, just going and helping out trainers there and just being around it, offering some level of, like, you know, scouting, and then TSF had youth leagues, and so I said, let's do it. So coached 2 teams that first year, and that's where I met you, and we coached the fifth graders, wasn't it?
5th graders, yes.
Yeah.
And
Yes, sir.
talk about talent disparity both within our group and how we learn to manage that age group and teach them not how to read the pick and roll just yet, but maybe how to dribble.
Absolutely. And that was so cool, because, you know, you think about this game, you know, as you do when you watch like the pros, like on this high level, and then you have to come to these kids and literally be like, okay, no, here's a bounce pass, or, you know, like, hey, when you get the rebound, you can't take 3 steps, you gotta pivot. And I thought it was really cool, and still do, because you have to distill down all the stuff that you want to tell them to what's important and what's gonna stick, and that applies at every single level. Because also, when you're in the pros, no one wants to hear you fucking talk for 2 minutes. So you better fit what you want in
Let's
8
go.
seconds. You know, you got you. So it's whether it's a 10-year-old or a, you know, multiple time all-star, if you want to get through to them, it's got to be concise. And so that was what I still think about from those days of coaching. Also, just being able to toss away results and look at what you're doing and look at improvement, because, you know, these kids, and especially the parents, would get quite into the results, or my kid's doing this or my kid's doing that, and it's like, that's not why I'm here. So I hope it's not why y'all are here, because the reason I think I'm here is to get kids better, and we're not going to do that by focusing on what's going to get us a win in the YBOA whatever Duluth Cup, you know, like, so that was,
because that matters, man. Did you see the trophy that went with that?
I know everybody got one, but some of them were bigger.
You know what's funny in coaching, in playing, you can work on your game and you have a lot of trial and error in summer leagues, summer camps. But in coaching, a lot of times there is no quote trial run. And the reason why is what you just mentioned, and also the pride of coaches a lot of times get in the way. And Searle and you are guys that are not that way. Obviously, if you're coaching a 5th grade and under team, you're willing to do some trial and error and work on your craft and use some stuff and work on being able to verbal cues and body language and other things, facial expressions, and all those things are so important. And a lot of guys don't do that. I always use camp, and a lot of people don't like camp and they just use it to pay their assistants or whatever, and that's fine. But I always use camp, even though it's with kids, and a lot of times not quote great players. It's introductional level, you know, but I use that to trial and error of how I communicate with people. Drills we might use, even though it might be for college level. How can we communicate it to do it? Can I get these kids who have never played to do it? If I can, then I know it will be okay at the college level, whatever. And I just think a lot of coaches don't do that. And I didn't come up with that myself, so I'm not trying to toot my own horn. Coach G was real good at that. And he would always show me, like, hey, today in camp, I'm going to take over for 10 minutes. We're going to do this 2-line drill that I'm going to see if it's something I want to do this year in practice. And I'd be like, oh, man. And then I've incorporated that myself now. And I even do it with my son's practices. Sometimes I help them out. I didn't today because I'm talking to you guys, but some days I'll jump in and we'll do something that I'm just looking at. I saw it on YouTube or I saw it on whatever, you know, and I want to see if it's something we might want to use. You guys were doing that, and I think that's awesome to me. Like, I love that stuff. True basketball junkies.
Hey, I'll tell you, when I switched from college to coaching 6 and 7 year olds, the ego gets in the way for a second, but it switched over pretty quick. And I love coaching youth basketball, but you have to have the right mindset. And Nick, I know you did and you have that mindset, even if you're talking about pros and national teams right now. You were amazing with those kids and taught them a lot, including my son who was on that team.
Well, they taught me a lot, honestly. Like it's first of all, I'd be wary of anybody, and still am wary of anybody who walks into those kind of situations and thinks they're above it or higher than that. Because at the end of the day, if you're above building a foundation for a player, then what does that say about you as a coach? If you just want to like fucking put the shingles on the roof, then that's what everybody wants to do. Hey, give me somebody who's really good and I'll help them be really good. It's like, oh, great job. So I think that's important. And I've, even at TSF, you meet a lot of people, they come in and talk really big about everything they want to do. And it's like, oh, I want to do this. And then it's like, you realize a lot of folks just want a picture with Brandon Ingram for their Instagram. And it's like, well, that's cool, man. I hope you get, your likes and everything, but I'm pretty sure you're not going to be the person I'm going to see next year. And I'm pretty sure you're not going to be taking that next step if you're just in it for this instant gratification, because at the end of the day, the kids deserve better than that, right? So like if you're not someone that's willing to work at that and not just like, oh man, it's bullshit, I have to work with these kids, I wish I could, then the kids deserve better energy than that. And so that was something that it was cool to work. Like I said, I had not coached before. I coached a team when I was in high school one year when I had a broken wrist, so I wanted to do something. But like I had not coached before, so to learn from you was an exceptional opportunity for me. So if I had walked in with my nose up, like, oh man, I came from the Hawks, what? It was gonna be a waste of everyone's time. Most importantly, the kids who we were there for, So that was really cool.
Good times, and I'm so glad that we get to reconnect now. But one other place that we almost connected, I don't know if you remember this, we traded messages. I was somewhere around Beijing and you were working with the hoops team in Duangjiang. What was the name of the town?
I think at that point was my first time there. So were you in the Southeast?
That's where we started.
And that would have been Dongguan when I was with the Shenzhen Leopards. Yes, sir.
How did you end up twice then in China working with the teams out there?
So with TSF, I was looking for ways to contribute, and they did not have anyone full time doing like performance training, strength and conditioning. So I was like, hey, if I get this degree, will you guys help me pay for this, or this certification? And they did. And so I got certified with strength and conditioning. We had brought over 2 teams to do training camps in China, and the Shenzhen Leopards were the first one, and they brought me back with them for an extra 2 months to help them out.
They came over to the U.S., to Atlanta, to do training and kind of camp, if you will, in preseason. And then
TSF, we ran an 8-week camp in Atlanta for a CBA team that's their NBA. And then at the end of that 8 weeks, they invited me back for 2 months. So I went over there and continued to kind of just help out on every level, learned a lot, and came back to the States after that. We hosted another camp for team Hebei Dragons in the 2nd division. They also invited me to come back with them. And that second time is when I was with them, I was studying to become certified as a strength coach. And meanwhile, I was acting as a strength coach. So you mentioned in the podcast earlier on, like working in obscurity. That's kind of what I tell people about China is like, make your mistakes in the dark. I think that's a good thing to do. And in China, it was great because I was encouraged to kind of do whatever I wanted to do and help out in whatever ways I wanted. I look back at some of my workouts where I really discovered some great things and some great methods that I still use. Other workouts, I'm like, oh man, that was, even in the moment, I'm like, this is bad. This is not good. I'm scrapping this. And I really got to kind of find an identity as a coach, studied for 6 months or whatever it was. The last 2 of those were in China. And then when I got that was my first actual job on a sideline coaching games during a season in the 2nd division there. So when I got back from that second time in China, I took my test, I got certified. And then after a 2-month stint and a 3-month stint in China, my wife and I, well, the day I got back from my first time in China, I proposed to my wife. And the week after I got back the second time, I married my wife. And then we bought a home together. And then 10 days after we bought that home, I got an offer to coach the Sichuan Blue Whales in China. And we sat as we always do when we're mulling over a trip. We sat down, we watched Anthony Bourdain, his episode where he went to Chengdu, the city where I was offered the job, and we saw him eat a rabbit head. And about 20 minutes into the episode, I was like, I think I'm doing this. My wife was like, I know you are. So 10 days into our new house, I took an 11-month contract in China to go be with the Blue Whales. And it was an incredible experience. Long 5-month off season. So you really got to work on their bodies a lot. Too much.
Wow. Okay.
But that's the Chinese way.
Mm-hmm.
They're not big on the off time. So having to find a way to structure that was really cool. And
right. What you mean by that is there's no league games during those 5 months.
Correct.
But you're still under contract, as are the players. So you're not taking time off.
Exactly. So they're living in a dorm, going 2, sometimes 3 a day, which is, I'm not condoning that on this podcast. I'm just saying that sometimes you have to, not sometimes, always, you have to adapt culturally to where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, I've seen a lot of American coaches go to China and try to change everything about what they see there, not understanding that it's a 5,000-year-old culture, and they're not interested in you changing every single thing about how they do things. So what I tell coaches who go to China is, or anywhere, but especially China, figure out the 5 things that you think are most important to change. Of those 5, pick your top 3. Of those 3, narrow it down to 1.
Work on 1.
And then once you get that 1, figure out exactly when the right time is to bring that up. And better yet, figure out a way to solve that problem on your own without involving anyone else, because no one's there. China's under no obligation to make sense to you. That's not why it's there. It's not there to make sense to the coach who just got off the plane. China is China, and China is thinking about 1,000 years down the road. They're not thinking about today and how this new guy is going to come in and explain to us how everything we do is wrong. That's not a productive way to go about making changes. So the best thing to do is adapt to where you are, understand that China is not there to make sense to you, and figure out how you can affect change without complaining and without insulting the way they do things. Because at the end of the day, if you work hard and they see results in the way their players improve, then that's the only way that you can truly gain trust in any kind of leeway. So China was, I love China. Yeah, I learned so much. They embraced me. They loved me there. I loved them. So much warmth and hospitality, and like with anything.
And
like,
great food.
Oh, incredible food. I was lucky enough to go to, there's like 35 different provinces and municipalities. I was lucky enough to go to 22 of those. So I really worked my way around the country. And
as you traveled with the team.
Yes, sir. Playing, we had a 56 game schedule. My third time there. So we were every 3 days, 2 days really, we were traveling. And Chengdu is in the middle of the country, so everything starts with a 3-hour flight and then something. So we were moving, but I got to see so much of that country. Try so many different foods from different regions, and it was a incredible experience.
How about that? And you talk about trust, and let's jump ahead now as you're working with a Tunisia team, Nick. How do you build that trust? What are some suggestions, advice that you have for people listening, for me, for Corey, on building trust with a new group of players, be it in China, be it 5th graders in Atlanta, be it the Tunisian national team now? What have you done?
That's a really good question. Let me think for a second.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that's coming to mind, because I want to answer it thoughtfully here, the first thing that's coming to mind is preparation. No matter what the level is, whether it's a NBA player or a 10-year-old, if you're winging it and you're making shit up, they're going to smell that on you. So prepare. Like when I got to Tunisia this time, I got off a super long 2 flights, showed up, my bag was lost. Sucks. What am I going to do? Complain? How's that going to help? It's not. So I got there on maybe like, an hour and a half sleep. We have I get to the hotel. We have a practice 40 minutes later, something like that. So I'm like, all right. So I know that I need to get myself together. And that first impression is going to be so, so, so important. And I'm not going to be like, hey, well, yeah, my flight was long and I didn't sleep so much and my back. No. I was like, where's the coffee machine? Went and had a couple espressos, making sure I'm walking in there looking like I'm ready to roll. Like I'm off 9 hours sleep and ready to go. I was like, okay, we got 90 minutes. And I'm starting to practice, right? Because I got to get them warm and get them ready.
Mm-hmm.
So my first thing, I'm getting on the sideline. I'm bringing great energy, and I'm finding it within myself to bring great energy to deliver, like we talked about earlier, clear, concise messages, tell them what we're doing, tell them briefly why we're doing it without rambling and talking too much, demonstrating it clearly with force. That's something I got a lot of experience with in China, where there is a language barrier. Being demonstrative physically is super important. Body language, super important. Because even if there's a language barrier, which I had not even met these players, you know what I mean?
Right.
And here they are. I've got 16 guys looking at me like, okay, what do we do for the next 20 minutes? And so I'd say be prepared. I knew what warm-up I was going to do before I got on the plane to come over here. It wasn't like, oh, what's the bet? No, I knew what my warm-up was going to be. And so even though they lost my bag, I had packed the clothes that I knew I would need for the first workout in my carry-on.
I was going to ask that question. Did you go to the shop on the corner and get a Tunisia t-shirt, but you were ready? Be prepared.
I've lost bags before. I mean, we don't need to go into this part, but like I did an internship with NBC at the Vancouver Olympics, and I did my bag for the first 3 days. So I wore the same outfit for the first 3 days, and I was like, never again. So every time I travel, I bring at least 2 changes of clothes, and if I'm traveling to a job, I bring my work clothes in that carry-on bag that I have with me. And I always have some bands with me, always have something, so that at least I show up ready to roll. I have a foam roller that collapses, I put in my bag. So, lacrosse ball, so whatever. I'm not going to be like, oh, well, my bag got lost. No one cares. No one cares about your excuses, So once I realized that, I was like, no matter what the situation is, I'm going to be prepared and ready. So then obviously once my stuff did get there, I had done the research before of who these players are, what their names are. I'd watched film of them. It always drives me a little bit wild, and it's baffling to me when people, even on the physical side, work with players they haven't watched before. Because it's like, how do you expect to, it's hard. I'm not going to find, clips of 9-year-olds and stuff. That's a little tougher. But if you're working on the professional level and YouTube exists, then it's sort of unacceptable to me to not have watched and understand a little bit about what this player is, because you mentioned trust and how to get it. That's another thing, is that when I show up in Tunisia and I talk to Oussama Marnawi and I'm like, hey man, I was watching your game against Kairouan last year and I noticed that. He's like, what? So that's a way to, okay, this guy is not just here to come and, teach us some exercises and leave, but he's actually somewhat invested in me and invested in this job. And I tell them all the time, because it's true. Like, I'm here to build something. I'm not here to come and work for a few weeks and walk away. I want to build something that's sustainable, and I want to care about each individual player and not treat them like some monolith of Tunisian basketball. It's Oussama, it's Feris, it's Amru. Everyone is different. People ask me, what are Tunisians like? What are Chinese people like? I don't know. What are Americans like? Get a random sample of 100 people in your life, and how much overlap in the Venn diagram is there? I guess not much.
Right.
So it's the same everywhere you go. Every human is different. Every individual has different needs. You can't coach everyone the same. So the sooner I realized that and started making that the most important thing for my coaching approach is coaching the human and caring about the human, the rest of the stuff falls into place, because I know that I'm going to be prepared on the training side of things. I know that I'm going to do my homework. I know that I'm going to be there early. I know that I'm going to stay late to help guys with their individual needs. So that's really, I guess where I'd leave it on that one.
Yeah, well, you said the word care more than once there, and that's the big part. You care, and you demonstrate it through that preparation and through the language you use. How about that? All right. Well, hey, good luck to you, Nick, and that Tunisia team as you have the friendlies and go into Olympic qualifiers. That it would be spectacular to see Tunisia in the Olympics if that can develop. But definitely AfroBasket when that rolls around in August. Corey, is it time? Do we jump ahead? Does the lightning strike?
Lightning's hit. Let's go. Let's get
All
it.
right.
All right. So we do lightning round. We'll ask you 2 to 3 questions apiece. And the shot clock is on. We want good, quick, rapid answers. But if you have a good story or a good name drop, you can run with it.
No,
right,
hold me to a clock. Hold me to a clock. I need to trim this down. I got to be more efficient.
All right. So here we go. You've been all over the world. You got one place to eat your last meal. What country is it in, and what place are you eating?
Such a good question. All right, I'm going to Barcelona. I'm going to this place called Champagneria. It's cava, glasses of cava or rosé, but I'm more of a cava guy, for like 90 cents. And you can only drink if you're eating a sandwich there. And they have a chalkboard with sandwiches that are bread, meat, cheese, just like different types of that. I'm going to get a sandwich with foie gras and camembert and some cava, and then I'm gonna get a second sandwich with some jamon serrano and whatever cheese they're rolling with, and I'm gonna let the cava flow, and I will die a happy man.
I love it. I love it. All right. So now you come back, you're in Atlanta. What's the one thing you got to do when you're back home, whether it's an eating place or go see a certain place, excluding family? Obviously, you're going to go back and get with your family, but excluding that, what's the one thing you got to do because you really miss that good old Southern ATL shouty life? What is it?
Ooh. Oh man, that's so hard. That's so hard. I mean, for me, honestly, like my last day before I left, I just met up with a couple of buddies and we walked around Little 5 Points, and just stopped at a couple of spots for, I had a bite of the burger at the Vortex. Then we stopped at the Porter for a few beers and just kind of strolled around and chilled. And honestly, Atlanta's rich with so many different things to do, but if you just drop me off in Little 5 Points, somewhere kind of in my neck of the woods, East Atlanta, and just let me stroll around and kind of without a plan and stop a couple places to eat with some good friends, that's Atlanta to me,
I love it. I love it. All right. And last one for me, and then Sir will take over in the lightning round, is, in all these avenues of coaching and life and everything, what's the one thing that you, no matter where you coach or where you land or where you scout or where you do skill work, you're going to take with you? What's the one thing, like if it was a physical tool, you're bringing it with you? Is it a communication, the X and O? Is it a personality trait? What is it? The one tool you're bringing with you from your toolbox?
This might sound cheesy, but it's an open mind. Anywhere I go, I'm going to not go with any preconceptions. I like to know a little bit about where I'm going, but like once I find out I'm going somewhere, it's like if I know I'm going to see the movie, I don't want to watch the trailer. So like with Tunisia, I knew something about it, but once I decided for sure I was going, I'm like, I'm not going to the Wikipedia page and looking at too much, because it's more impactful for me to land somewhere and then drive around and look around and feel it. And not come with too many preconceptions that might get in the way of discovery.
I love it. All right, go, Searle. You got the lightning. Let's get it.
All right. I want some names here of players that you've seen along the way. Best European player or favorite European player that you've watched in person.
My favorite European players, I got to give a couple here. It's three. It's Milos Teodosic, the scruffy Serbian point guard playing for Bologna now. Just such a creative passer, rips cigarettes at halftime, doesn't give a fuck. I love him. Sergio Yul and Sergio Rodriguez, that backcourt with Real Madrid, Chacho, those guys are like literally the reason I grew a beard. So that
you fit right in. Yep.
those I was like, man, I gotta live their life. So I go, yeah, Sergio Rodriguez, Sergio Yul, Milos Teodosic, that three-headed point guard monster for me.
We're in the middle of the NBA playoffs, and everybody knows the Chris Pauls after the Suns' performance here. But who are the U.S. players who are the big names in Europe that you've seen that you say, man, this guy is a massive star that over here the name doesn't ring a bell?
My answer is not going to be necessarily star, but like, here's a guy that I could see. You mentioned the NBA playoffs. Here's a guy two guys that could be playing in the NBA playoffs tonight and just plug and play. I think Corey Higgins and Will Clyburn both fit that mold as just wings, especially Clyburn, who just defends, two, arguably three positions, hits open shots, doesn't need to try to take 3 and 4 dribbles and step backs and everything. He knows what he's out there to do is to make shots. And then when he's got an opportunity to put on the floor, he can do that and attack the rim. So I think more and more that's what teams need is guys that are intelligent, that are skilled. And I think a big skill is knowing who you are and playing within a role consistently, because that's the word that keeps coming to mind for me is consistency. Everyone loves the flashes because that's what gets you the highlights. But if you can't do that every night, then you literally cannot be on the floor in these playoffs. We're seeing that, right?
3, 2, 1, shot clock just went off. And 2 other quick ones. Atlanta bars. You say you come back and got behind the bar to make $1 or $2 back in the day. What bars? Where could we find Nick Gibson serving it up?
I always worked at the Treehouse, on and off for 6 years. My dad was a regular there. So from 18 to 25, even my first year with the Hawks, they were not paying me the Joe Johnson contract. So I was working Saturdays and Sundays at the bar to make ends meet. And that's where I met my wife. My favorite bar to go get a drink traditionally. I love Church on Edgewood. Really cool bar, really cool vibes.
All right. Atlanta, real cool vibes, just like yours. And I think you posted about this at some point, but tell us last to wrap it up here, ping pong and Devin Booker.
Oh, yeah. So, when I was working with the Hawks, my office was sort of like the back of my office door opened up to the players' lounge. So we'd run draft workouts, and I mentioned part of my job was to fill up the coolers as well as do the scouting. So I'd also take people to and from the airport. So, Devin Booker was coming in for workout, whatever, I'd go scoop him and then take him back. And everyone was playing ping pong in there, and he was just killing everybody. And there were a couple dudes that were just atrocious. Like, you wouldn't believe. These guys are making, $15 million, but like literally missing the ball or, not again, athlete, right? What does athlete mean? And so Booker was just talking crazy shit. People literally weren't scoring much on him at all. They weren't so good though. And I'm no great ping pong player, but I was like decent. I was like, all right, well, this fucking guy, let's go at least like get a few points off him. And he was like, you won't score 5. And then I got up a little bit and he was like, you won't score 10. And then I ended up getting 16 off of him, but he beat me. He was good. Legit good. And I walked away and I said in the post and I was like, all right, I feel like I kind of proved something there. And he was pissed that I scored 10. And that's why he's, playing and I'm coaching. He's different mentally.
Exactly. It's that example of that competitiveness and that mental drive. Absolutely. And we're seeing at this playoff, but it's been going for a while, forever.
I literally, when I walked away too, I was like, you know what? I hope that guy falls to 15 because if I have at that point, we thought he was just like a shooter because that's all he'd done at Kentucky. I was like, I want my shooter to be extremely confident, to have a short memory, to think the next one's going in, to move on to the next play, all those things. And I was probably extrapolating too much from a ping pong game, but you definitely saw something in him that day.
How about that? Nick, we're going to wrap things up here because we could talk for hours and hear your stories, man. But got a final message for our viewers and listeners, or you got some shout outs that you need to make sure you get out there? What do you got for us as we close it out?
Oh, I just want to thank you guys, man. You know, it's obscurity is the word you use, right? There are so many coaches out there. I find a lot of the coaches doing the best work are not the ones that are, you know, necessarily on TV at college X or Y or Z or whatever. You know, it's the people that are driving from one gym to another, like we've all done, to help players get better, no matter what the level is, and not thinking. I think a lot of coaches think, how can this player help me advance what I want to do? And so it's cool to talk to a couple of guys that are thinking about what they can do to help the players. So my shout out is to y'all for that. So thanks for having me on.
Thanks, man. Hey, and if you want a shameless plug, we're about to give ours. Following us on Instagram, Off Beaten Path Podcast, or Twitter, Off Beaten Path _. Anything from you, Nick Gibson? You want some follows out there? Because they'll be rolling in.
What was it? He said 36 followers on his first podcast. That's very similar. We've heard that before.
There we go. My Instagram is FreaknikATL, Nick with NICK. If anyone who knows Atlanta is gonna understand the meaning there. That was my rap name when I was at Grady, Freaknik.
I love it.
So I just decided to keep it alive there. It's a little bit of basketball, a lot more in the stories. It's more basketball and training, but the posts are more food, honestly.
Food, some incredible food pictures. And then also you guys do need to check it out, FreaknikATL here, with some of the spots that he's been, the training on the Mediterranean with the Tunisian national team, among other things. So great stuff. All right. Well, Nick, it is an absolute pleasure to hear your thoughts, the depth of some of these ideas, connections, people, places, foods, hoops, training that you've shared with us today. This has really been a special episode.
No, this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this, and thanks for, taking me back down memory lane here, and really appreciate y'all.
I honestly feel like my passport has been stamped 3 or 4 times as we've talked. I've learned a lot. I love it. And we're a show for those who have coached, used to coach, those who are currently coaching, those who follow coaches, those who help coaches out, those who hire and fire the coaches. And we really enjoyed your stories. And we feel like, I think there's some guys out there listening that may have learned a new avenue to go to not only explore the world, but to use basketball and not let it use them.
Well said. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Nick. We'll see you. Good luck.
Appreciate y'all. Take care.